Tonight, the country is waiting with bated breath for the special sitting of the National Assembly set to be held tomorrow. The sitting is set to consider President Uhuru Kenyatta's reservations on the Financial Bill 2018-2019, which he declined to assent to last week. Now, the Finance Bill was a recommendation to delay the implementation of the 16% VAT on petroleum products for the second time by 2 years. When returning the bill to the August House, the President recommended for a 50% reduction of the VAT to 8%, insisting it was unnecessary in order to finance the constitutional order. Now, the President also directed all government agencies to exercise austerity measures and fiscal discipline in order to seal a financial gap in the budget. But even as the sharply divided MPs consider the President's reservation, one issue is emerging as the only uniting factor: the CDF kitty. The CDF kitty was allocated some 5 billion shillings more in the current financial year, but as Aiden Duale says, the kitty will remain intact in the wake of government budget cuts. Let's listen in.
It is the responsibility of the National Assembly, in conformity with the PFM Act, to have a balanced budget. So until those two documents, until the Speaker reads his message from the President, until I table the supplementary appropriation estimate from the National Treasury, anything else is hearsay. And there is no cuts on CDF. I want to confirm that.
So what qualifies the CDF to be spared from being slashed if all other allocations in the budget are being subjected to cuts? When he rejected the finance bill last week, the President said all persons in public service must make sacrifices. Let's listen to what the President said.
These budget cuts ask all of us in government that we tighten our belts. It also ensures that the sacrifices made by tax-compliant Kenyans are matched by discipline from all of us in the public service.
Well, on the show tonight, I shall be speaking to Chuka Igambangombe, Member of Parliament Patrick Munene, his Wajir East counterpart Rashid Kasim, who's joining the show from our City Centre studios, as well as the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, or TISA, Wanjiro Gikonyo, who's on her way. She will be joining us shortly here on the show. But before we cross over to them, let's hear from our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's on standby with Third Way Alliance Party leader, Dr. Ekuru Aukot. Sophia, very good evening to you. I'm sure the Third Way Alliance Party leader has very interesting insights on the 16% VAT and, of course, the expectations for tomorrow and Thursday. Take us through that.
Indeed, Akisa, good evening to you. You know, just before I came up for the show, I received a tweet from one of our viewers who asked, I hope tonight the focus of the big story will be on whether members of parliament will stand with Kenyans. But clearly, as you've seen from the various conversations we've been having with politicians, those that do not support the rejection of the finance bill by the president and pegging that VAT at 8% and calling for austerity measures, argue they're standing by Kenyans. The president, as you played in that clip, on the other hand, is arguing Kenyans bestowed on themselves this constitutional order and it costs money for it to be able to run as it should. But as you said, the Third Way Alliance Party leader, Ekuru Aukot, is a man who has been known being on the forefront of calling for Punguza Mzigo. That campaign they have been running and calling for a relook at the structure of governance, that overrepresentation question that has seen Kenya's wage bill balloon astronomically, Akisa, because as it stands right now, you have 50% of our revenue going to 2% of the public service. So that's a worrying sign. But let's hear some more from him, sir. And let me begin with putting to you, President Uhuru Kenyatta pretty much called out members of parliament, saying they're practicing good politics but bad leadership. Do you support his move to move the VAT and peg it to 8% but still increase tax in a sense?
Well, I do agree with the president that parliament is practicing really bad leadership. there is even no good politics coming from our parliament, because good politics, Sophia, presupposes that you do that which is good for your constituents, the people that you represent. This parliament is the biggest letdown that this country has had. Let's go back memory lane, 2013. The VAT Act 2013 was passed, almost unanimously at a rate of over 90% by the then CORD, which is now NASA, and Jubilee. So really, therein lies the problem. When they were debating this law, assuming they were debating it at all, what did they take into consideration? If they are taking into consideration the problems, the challenges their constituents go through, then they wouldn't have in the first place passed this law. Because what this law is doing, it is targeting basic commodities that an ordinary Kenyan needs to be able to live a decent life, to be able to just work the economy, to be able to make a contribution. So in fact, it's a joke when President Uhuru himself says that we want to do affordable healthcare, affordable housing. You cannot achieve such objectives when the populace you target, because affordable housing is not targeting people like yourself and myself and many others. It's targeting the people who are low-income earners. So when the low-income earners are not able to afford basic things like petroleum products, unga, processed milk, LPG gas, it's not possible. But the problem is this. This problem originated from Parliament. I was really, really laughing my head off when they were trying to shift the blame to President Uhuru Kenyatta. You see, President Uhuru Kenyatta has no choice but to enforce legislation passed by the people's representative. The people's representatives are the parliamentarians. They are the ones who passed this law. So to try and shift the blame and say, let's blame the President Uhuru Kenyatta, as a matter of fact, President Uhuru Kenyatta has no choice but to implement the law that is passed by the sovereign authority in this country, which is the national legislature. So
let me ask you this. Yeah. Tomorrow, as they deliberate and by Thursday reach a decision, do you support them vetoing the president and we go back to where we were before, or this 8% you think from the president's argument last week is needed for Kenya to continue?
First of all, I don't support VAT on petroleum, even if it is 1%, or even if it is 0.5%. I don't support it at all. I think the parliamentarians need to reject the president's proposal in totality and amend the VAT Act 2013 as we had proposed as Third Way Alliance. We had proposed to them that they should move those products from the current tax exempt to zero rated. You see? And that's where the problem is, because when you zero rate, when you move products from zero rate to tax exempt, it means you're actually passing the burden of production to the common mwananchi. So why can't they just act on the memorandum that Third Way Alliance Kenya had proposed to them in April this year? We reminded them of the same in August 16th this year. Let them just amend the law. So this thing of VAT 8% or whatever the case is, it is not going to help Kenyans at the end of the day, because it is targeting common products, basic needs of the Kenyans.
You've talked about Punguza Mizigo, and there are many coming out. We saw a group of religious leaders saying we need to rethink our representation, it's too much. However, some economists argue it is not downgrading in terms of numbers, that the Auditor General at one point said devolution and the different structures of representation is not what's consuming a lot of our money. It's the big infrastructure projects that the government has taken up. So that will only reduce by a little bit. It's the big infrastructural projects that not value for money that is what we should be rethinking.
I totally agree with the Auditor General, Edward Ouko, and Edward Ouko has made it clear that today, if you look at the Auditor General report, Sophia, now there is a common denominator, value for money. Whatever project is being undertaken out there, there is really no value for money. So, in the context of Punguza Mizigo, and if the president was truthful to the idea that we have got a huge wage bill and that we must reduce it, we have also suggested as a party areas where the president can cut costs. For example, it is this same president, or starting from the Jubilee, the Kibaki administration, that retained a system of government called provincial administration. And what they did is they just bastardized it, baptized it, and calling it regional commissioners and the rest. That is a cost on its own. Our proposal has been abolish that system of administration because, first of all, it's even interfering with devolution. Number two, President Uhuru Kenyatta today really has no moral authority to say that the wage bill is high. He himself created an institution called the Chief Administrative Secretaries. That is a whole regime that comes with a huge cost. So if he really wanted to reduce the wage bill, what President Uhuru Kenyatta can actually do is, first of all, to abolish the Chief Administrative Secretary's position. After all, they were created unconstitutionally. There was no public participation. It was under a recommendation from the Public Service Commission. He has also recently created what they call the Building Bridges team. You know, these people are asking for billions and millions of money to be able to do things that are already findings we already have. I mean, what ails this country? If it is issues of land, transitional justice, there are already findings on that. So it can actually cut down costs. We have also said, and yesterday I had the vice chairperson of, in your show, David Murade, say that I think we have to reduce parliament. Why are they shy from just supporting Third Way Alliance proposal to reduce parliament? We have said that Parliament currently as constituted is costing Kenyans at 6.8 billion Kenya shillings annually. In our proposal and the formula we have provided, we are going to cut down Parliament from 416 members of Parliament to only 194, and that will reduce the cost from that 6.8 billion to just 5 billion annually. Okay? We are not shy even to say, and tomorrow we'll be giving a comprehensive state of the address response to President Uhuru Kenyatta, in which we'll be making some serious proposals, including why do we need a private jet for president? Let's sell it. You know, let's disband some of the institutions that we have in this country. We don't need all of that. And I think that is the austerity measures that we need. You know, Sophia, if you look at the president's desperation to try and raise money, let's look at the 8% or 8% VAT taxation on petroleum. It is only targeting to raise 35.5 billion Kenya shillings annually. Okay? Let's go back to the Auditor General report. The Auditor General report has actually established how governors, cabinet secretaries, PSs, directors of parastatals, including the national government, are actually stealing money from the public in billions of Kenya shillings. Okay. So really the truth for the matter is you don't need to tax Kenyan even 0.00%. You all you need to do is recover that money that the Auditor General has actually established has been stolen. Okay. Yeah? So it's only 35.5 billion.
So one of the contentious issues now that stands is the CDF. And we know members of parliament will always find unity of purpose when something touches on them, their welfare, their allowances, their salaries. And so on one hand, you have devolution. So many have wondered, do we need CDF in the first place? Isn't this duplicity? But in the past, the other day we saw MCAs asking for a kitty. The DP told them, we'll organize. Women rep, when they entered office, they entered the kitty. Then it was organized. So that at the end of the day, leaders just want to have kitties they control.
To be very brutally honest with you, CDF is a campaign kitty for members of parliament. It is not serving any purpose. After all, some of the things that they want to do are actually functions of devolved government. In fact, and this is where I still fault President Uhuru Kenyatta. You know, when he came into power, he needed to have abolished CDF with the county government now coming fully into force. So we don't need CDF because CDF is not serving any purpose. This is just campaign kitties for members of parliament. County governments have already taken care of all those development issues. In fact, in our proposal for Third Way Alliance, Punguza Mizigo, we favor the idea that let us use the ward as a unit of development. And that's where we should see development. We want to see in every ward schools, hospitals, roads, water, good roads. So the idea of CDF really must be abolished. And I think if President Uhuru was serious, and I hope he is serious, he must begin to say, okay, what are the things that we don't need as a country? We don't need CDF today because we are sending billions to the country. As a matter of fact, nobody is now focusing on CDF money, the Constituency Development Fund. We are all looking at the governor. Yet nobody is asking, how has the MP used this money? It's duplicity, as you said, and I agree with you totally.
All right. Yeah. So let me put this to you as well. An economist opined that we're focusing so much on reducing the numbers on representation, but in his view, the madness or the devil is in the details, in as far as the tea, the flowers, the phone call allowances in all of these ministries, parastatals, that when you put all of that money combined, it's insane, the kind of luxuries and the kind of money that Kenyans are spending, and nobody's questioning that.
Let me tell you why reduced parliament, Punguza Mizigo, is a very important agenda for this country. Because it's about leadership, it's about care, it's about stewardship. When you have a lackluster leadership, a leadership that does not scrutinize budgets, for example, that does not question government expenditure, then therein lies the problem. They pass anything else so long as it benefits them. So for me, I agree, and I think it was Kwame, I saw Kwame challenging us that reducing parliament is not the issue. I think Kwame has not appreciated the import of Third Way Alliance proposal. The idea that any country to prosper, you need stewardship and you need leadership. What we are saying is, if the law 2013 VAT Act was actually a product of bad leadership, as President Uhuru Kenyatta himself admitted in his State of the Nation address. Yeah. So for us, what we are saying is, first of all, let's begin by saving the 31 billion, 31.5 billion that we are saving. And imagine, we have done our maths too. If you were to redistribute this money in all the 1450 wards, can you imagine what it means for us who are in Kilimani ward here today? We have told, here is 100 million. What is it that you guys want to do with this 100 million? I would say, let's fix the roads, let's fix the lighting, and we will be able to do that. So I think it's important that people like Kwame and Institute of Economic Affairs appreciate the fact that Third Way Alliance Kenya's proposal is not just about reducing the size of parliament, it's also about enhancing devolution. We are proposing to increase from 15 to 35%. We are increasing to make Senate a upper house with veto power, so that when parliamentarians pass a law like the Division of Revenue Law, number 7 of 2018, which really is unconstitutional, then Parliament is able to veto it. We are also seeking to address the problem of women and men in leadership, among other things. We are also, just reducing the cost. We are overrepresented. Sophia, our representation is 400%, over 400%. It comes with a cost to you, the taxpayer, to you and me. Today we live here, we have to fuel our cars, or we have to board a matatu. That is the cost that goes into servicing this. Remember, I know you want to end, but let me put it in perspective. The 35.5 billion that President Uhuru Kenyatta wants to raise through the 8% VAT on petroleum, first of all, it will not benefit Kenyans. It will actually go to benefit the very, very parliamentarians. This year alone, 2018-2019 budget, parliamentarians increased their budget by 12 billion Kenya shillings. So out of the 35.5 billion, 12 billion will go to parliamentarians. Okay? And then, of course, they've got the Building Bridges team, the regional government or provincial administration. So what we are saying as Third Way Alliance Kenya is, I think President Uhuru will do this country justice if he just said, you know what? There are certain offices we don't need in this country. There are certain cost cutting we need in this country. We must also declare what's our national debt, honestly. Okay? And I think for me, that's the way to go.
That's the way to go. Very well said, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Ekuru Okot is the party leader of the Third Way Alliance, articulating the proposals they have. But now, Akisa, all eyes will be on Parliament, those special sittings tomorrow and Thursday. The president, of course, has a majority through his Jubilee party, but some of those members have already expressed that they will not be supporting this memoranda. So will those opposed to the president's proposals be able to raise the requisite 2/3 majority to veto the president's move? So we'll have to wait and see. Back to you, Akisa.
Sophia, thank you. So the MPs sit tomorrow and Thursday, of course, to deliberate the reservations that the president had on the 16% VAT. Of course, I want to quickly take you through what will happen tomorrow at that particular sitting, and of course on Thursday, when the Speaker, of course, brings this message from the president to members of the National Assembly. They will definitely sit tomorrow and Thursday to consider the president's memorandum on the finance bill. So the Speaker will read the message of the president, of course, after this is filed by the clerk of the National Assembly. The leader of majority party tables supplementary appropriations estimates, and of course that will be Aiden Duale, who's the majority leader in the National Assembly. After that, members will then consider the president's memoranda or reject it, of course, trying to consider what are the modalities, what works, what doesn't work. Those that are rejecting will, of course, air out their views on the floor of the House why they're seeking to reject these particular proposals by President Uhuru Kenyatta. For this to pass, at least 2/3 of the members must vote against the reservations to retain the bill as is or make amendments contrary to President Uhuru Kenyatta's memoranda. So for them to veto it, it means about 233 members will have to vote against President Uhuru Kenyatta's proposals, 233 out of the 349 members. So, of course, it will be very interesting to see what are some of the conversations that will go on inside the chambers and outside, even as members of parliament lobby. It's quite interesting how we have already seen various members from different parties speak out against or for the proposals by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Hence the reason why we have members of parliament here in studio today to just help us dissect this issue and understand why they will be voting the way they will be voting. Once again, I'll introduce my guest. Patrick Munene is a member of parliament for Chukaigamba Ng'ombe, and Rashid Kasim, his counterpart, member of parliament for Wajir East. In a short while, Wanjiro Gikonyo, the national coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, will be joining us as well. TISA has been in the forefront of filing cases to declare CDF unconstitutional, so it will be very interesting to hear what her insights are, especially with the way members of parliament are equipped to most likely vote depending on how these proposals, on whether these proposals will affect the royal kitty, which is the CDF. To the guests now, Patrick Munene, the Chukaigamba Ng'ombe Member of Parliament, and Rashid Kasim. I'll start with you, Patrick. Good evening. Thank you once again for joining us here tonight on The Big Story. How did you receive this proposal by President Uhuru Kenyatta? What are your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. One, before I can say how I responded to the proposal, I need to say that the more I listen to most presidential candidates we had at the last general election, the more I'm convinced that Uhuru Kenyatta still remains the best candidate. Because I've just listened to the Third Way Alliance leader condemn this parliament, and he says the toll of the parliament is the worst parliament we have ever had.
Yeah.
And on the basis of that, he says that we are the ones who enacted the 2013 VAT bill. He needs to know that the 2013 VAT bill was enacted by the 11th parliament, not the 12th of the parliament. And that's why the 12th of the parliament has come and said it was a long bill. So you can't condemn the 12th of the parliament for a law they did not implement and for a law they are trying to collect. Secondly, I need to say this, that the president was very clear. One, that we have a bloated workforce in this country, that we passed a constitution that is so expensive to finance. And secondly, he said, so that we can finance this constitution, we need to introduce austerity measures. So from where I start as a Jubilee Member of Parliament, and I support my president, and all I say is because I wish he also succeeds. We have an alternative here. To revise this constitution that we are saying it's very bloated, or to introduce austerity measures and cut budget, which is more easy. Why can't we face the devil as a country for once and admit that when we pass this constitution, it is very clear, to petition, to rekebishe. We are even to hold a conference after enacting the constitution, which we have never held, to look at the constitution and its shortcomings. So I would challenge the president today, especially the deputy president who led the country against the constitution. Is the high time we sat down and looked at this constitution, because we can't continue complaining to Kenyans, because when you are the president, you address Kenyans and tell them you bestowed upon yourself this constitution that is very expensive. That's why they elected you, you are our leader. So what do we do about this bad constitution?
So what you're saying is you think our biggest problem is the constitutional order in terms of financing, and that's why we find ourselves where we are now?
It's a very expensive constitution, because once, like when I hear Ekulu Okot saying that we should scrap off CDF because it's doing nothing, we forgot that in the same constitution, there are elements of national government at the devolved function. A governor today does not build classrooms, does not do schools. A governor today does not do police stations. A governor today does not build offices for chiefs and provincial administration and security and the police and all that. Who will carry out those functions in the absence of CDF? You know, at times we talk about CDF as if there are no national government functions at the local level. There are functions that were left for members of parliament. So what I want to say is, one, we need to admit that we have a bad constitution. We don't need to bash the president. He found himself in this predicament. We also need not to bash this parliament. We found ourselves in this 2013 VAT bill, which I don't support at all. So is there a time that the president led this country to looking at this constitution? We need to audit it. And auditing it is not saying that it was wrong. That was the agreement from the word go, that tupitishe katiba alafu tutarekebisha.
So do you support President Uhuru Kenyatta's proposals to cut the VAT tax by 50% and, of course, the introduction of austerity measures to the public service?
I think we are playing with English. You know, I've heard media saying that reducing fuel cost from 16% to 8%. Why are we using the word reducing? Initially, the price has been added by 16%. But the president has said, let's not increase with the 16, let's increase with 8. So when you continue the word reducing, I think it's a PR issue that is confusing Kenyans. We are not reducing anything. We are adding the cost of fuel by 8%. We are not reducing.
Well, we are reducing the VAT by 50%, and the president himself used those same words. But I want to take it to your counterpart, Rashid Kasi, Member of Parliament for Wajir East. A few things that have been brought up by the Chukai Gambangombe Member of Parliament. One, he's saying we should not bash the president. This is a necessary evil. Two, we have a bad constitution. This has to happen. Do you support?
Well, thank you for having me here. Let me be able to say it here.
Yes. Clearly
on the matter of the constitution. Here is not an issue where we make an agenda for various parties. This is an agenda for Kenya. The taxation and how it affects Kenyans is one thing that is quite important for all of us to articulate. Jubilee is here to advance its manifesto. Third Way Alliance is equally there to advance its manifesto. But one thing that is quite important is we as members of parliament who have been elected to this parliament have a responsibility to safeguard the interests of Kenyans for that matter.
Yes.
The issue of constitution. The constitution is good. It has a bit of loopholes here and there. But with the time, hopefully we'll be able to change it. But it's a constitution Kenyans have voted for, and a constitution that we feel it has to be implemented for that matter. But one thing that is quite clear is how the memorandum of the head of state has been returned to the House and its impact on Kenyans. If you look at that memorandum, there's no room for debate or an amendment for that matter in the House. It is either we reject it or either we accept the recommendations of the head of state. But ours is very clear. We are going to reject that recommendations in total.
Yes.
And the reasons why we are going to reject is these two reasons. This is an increment of that VAT from where it is to 8%. Initially, the recommendation was 16%. The head of state is saying increase to 8%. So that's one thing Kenyans need to understand. We do not want to increase to 8% all petroleum and petroleum product that is going to be pumped to consumers. That will have a significant impact on the economy. It will affect all parts of the economy in terms of manufacturing, in terms of electricity supply, in terms of consumers. All those which affect the living standard of Kenyans is reasonably going to be affected by this 8% increment on the fuel and fuel product. And that's why we are against it.
Apart from...
and one thing, let me be able to assure Kate.
Yes. Apart from just Kenyans. Sorry to cut you short, apart from the president, of course, talking about putting the VAT tax at 8%, he talked about austerity measures, cutting spending, hospitality, domestic and foreign travels for public officers. What are your thoughts on this?
Let me be able to say it. The recommendation of the head state was very clear. To reduce CDF, to reduce equalization fund, to reduce 10 billion shillings for devolution, for county dispensation of funds. All those are critical financing that affects ordinary Kenyans. Kenyans. If you look at it clearly, those things, the last mile, supply of electricity to Kenyans for last supply, these are issues that really affect even if you look at it, the 4 key agenda the head of state has been able to articulate: manufacturing, food security. All those will certainly be affected because all those are being driven by fuel. So generally, it's not an issue of CDF. It is the living standard of Kenyans that are affected here, and it is the living standard of Kenya that are at stake. As a representative of the people of Kenya, we will say no to any memorandum that is likely to be thrown back into the House by the head of state, which will amount to an increase of about 8% for fuel.
All right.
And fuel product.
All right. All right, thank you. I want us to quickly take a short break. In a short while, of course, the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, Wanjiru Gikonyo, has already joined us in studio. When we get back, we will be picking her mind on what are her thoughts, of course, from the submissions we've gotten there from the members of parliament. One who is in complete support of President Uhuru Kenyatta's memorandum and proposals, and another who says they're going to reject those proposals because at the end of the day, the bottom line, Rashid Kasim, the member of parliament, says the cost of living for Kenyans is going to go high, and that's not what they're supporting. Let's take that quick break here on The Big Story. Stay with us.